Hey guys, Josh with Monaco Tool here, and today what we're going to be doing is showing you how to set up and cut a counterbore on a CAT 3400 series engine. We've got a CAT 3406B here that the head and the liners have already been removed, and we've got a Monaco counterbore cutter. Now, this counterbore cutter is ready to go. It has its cutting bit, which I'm going to show you how to set the depth on, how to install it. We're going to be using a straight edge first to tell you if the block's flat or not. How to use your depth mic or dial indicator on a sled gauge, what a liner shim is, and how to use it to set your cut depth and what it's doing. And basically, these are all the tools you're going to need. You're going to need a torque wrench, a wrench or a ratchet to loosen these bolts after. If you're going to check your deck for flatness, you're going to need a straight edge, feeler gauge set, and then this is included in the counterbore cutter kit. You're going to get your handles, the counterbore cutter, the cutting plate, and the cutting bit. There's also an extra tool here that is used for setting your counterbore cutter bit depth. So the first thing you're going to want to do is on an engine, generally, although CATs it's rare, check your block deck. Now it may have been prepped improperly, or maybe it's rusty, or maybe you suspect it's warped. I've never seen a warped CAT block, but weirder things have happened. So the person that prepped this block was not me. They used what appears to be a roll-lock disc, which is not my favorite way of prepping a block, but what you want to do is check it for flatness. So what we've got here is a straight edge, and then I've got a 2.5 thousandths feeler gauge. Generally you'll use a 2 thousandths, but I digress. So what you're doing is you're just seeing, obviously if you go where there's a hole, it's going to slide under, but if it doesn't go under the straight edge, you know it's at least flat enough for this. Now you might be saying, why does it matter? Well, your counterbore cutter is a precision machined tool, and if it's not on a flat surface, you're not going to get a flat result. Basically, you just want to check it in about as many places as you could possibly want. Crossways, straight, everything. I've checked it earlier, it's flat. So, the other things you might want to do, which we don't have here because it was already done, is check your head bolt holes for rust or debris, because you're going to have to torque this, and also I'm assuming putting your head back on, you're going to want to torque that, so make sure your head bolt holes are clean and dry. These have already been prepped for that. So the next thing you're going to do is, if it's already been cut before, you might want to match your cut depths. So this block is an unusual one because it's had number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 cut. Number 5 has not been cut, and then number 6 was cut. Why? I have no idea. Usually you'll do all of a set or maybe 1 or 2. I've never seen one where 5 of the 6 are cut, and this one isn't. As you can see, there's wear here, very typical on a high mileage CAT engine to have wear where the liner's sat. The wear by itself is not that bad in my estimation, but usually you'll get a sunk liner between here or here. And since these have all already been cut, we're going to cut number 5. Now, does it matter if the depths are different? Not really. Each liner is its own thing, and as long as your liner protrusion at the end is within 2 thousandths with adjacent liners, it doesn't really matter. You could cut this to 100 thousandths. This one could be at 30 thousandths. In general, I like to cut as shallow as possible. It's a lot less work. It's a lot less material out of the block, although the shim prices are about the same. So just to illustrate, let's see what these are already cut at. So this is a sled gauge with a dial indicator, and there's various types. All you're really going to do is zero it out and then slide it on to see what it's cut to. So this one's cut to about 32 thousandths. CAT makes shims in 30, 32, 34, 60, 62, 64, and it actually goes up from there. Generally, I'll cut to about 30. So this one, you need to reset it each time, unfortunately. There are simpler sled gauges where there's not this articulation, but this one is kind of nice depending on where you're reading. Now, you might notice it's moving quite a bit. That's mostly due to the surface texture of the deck here. Like I said, not super happy with how this was prepped, but hey, it's better than being dirty. So you want to get it to about 0, and then set it. So that one's about also 32. So those two, you would be using a 32,000 shim, hopefully. Let's see here. There's a lot of variance. That one's cut to a 30 thousandths. So you would use a 32, a 32, and a 30. I'm not going to measure the other ones, but just to illustrate, they can be cut to different lengths. Or depths, sorry, not length. Now this one, obviously, not cut, so there's nothing to measure there. But we're going to need to measure it when we're getting close to our cut depth. Okay, so this machine is ready to use, but the cutting head is not prepped yet. So there's a variety of ways to use this, your cutting bit. Now this turns in a clockwise fashion if you're standing over it. And the bit here, as you can see, only has one cutting side. So it's going to go that way, so that as you're rotating or clockwise, I should say, it's going to cut. But the problem is it moves. So you need to be able to set it to a specific depth. There's two ways, well, there's three ways. I've always kind of cut and then checked, and I found that about slightly past the lip is about perfect. However, there's two better ways to do it, one of which I learned today. First way is to use this, which is actually a Monaco Tool. Part number is 10225, and it will actually tell you the correct depth. This is for a Cat Factory cutting bit. So all you do is set it on there and then tighten it. It's not a head bolt. You don't have to torque it to 10,000 foot-pounds. So that's about right. Other way, which is, we'll just say the poor man's way, but this works also, showed this today. You can actually flip your cutting head and make sure that the cutting bit extends slightly past, which might be hard to see, the shim. If it does, you should be good. You do not want it to be shallower than the shim, or else that might be a problem. So if you haven't used your machine, you're going to take this off. Oh, I don't have the right size. Take this plug off and add engine oil in there. That's to lubricate the shaft against the bushings here. This machine was just built, so we don't need to lubricate it because it was just lubricated. But every time you use your machine, make sure you do that. If you're finding that your machine's binding up, ask yourself if you lubricated it. It's also temperature dependent. If it's below about 50 degrees, this machine has such tight tolerances, it can actually start binding up on you. I've had that happen before. Believe it or not, where I work, North Idaho, it gets below 50 degrees once or twice a year. So then we're going to install our cutting head with the bit on the top side. This is not something you're going to torque. There's no bolt or nut. You just run it on clockwise and tighten. It won't loosen on you since you're actually going in the tightening rotation while you're cutting. I like to snug it just slightly. You'll generally find that it tightens over time. There you go. See? You don't have to hulk it. So this machine's actually ready for cutting. Now normally, if this had a crank in it and the block was going to be used again, I would put a brake diaphragm here or a large plastic cap to catch the metal shavings, because you're going to be removing a good chunk, not a chunk, but as you can see, a good amount of material from the block. So those metal shavings are going to go in many places. So we're doing number 5 here. This uses 3 of your head bolt holes. So what I like to do is, even before you put the head bolts in, set your cutting head down gently. As you can see, it's resting on the cutting head bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick it up past that. So that it's not resting on the bit. As you can see, it rotates. Right, so if you're using the factory head bolts, obviously they're much longer than these guys. There's spacers included with the kit, so you can use your factory head bolts instead of these. If you don't have purchased extra bolts, which I generally use the head bolts with the spacers, works fine. Set this guy up here. Oop. Okay. Head bolt holes. And then he's torqued to 30 foot-pounds, not 300, not 3. So what are we going to cut this one to? Well, the shims we're using are 32 thousandths, but they're measuring a little bit wider than that, but not necessarily going to matter, and I'll explain that in a second. Now, the thing about these set screws, so you have two collars. You have your stop collar and your cutting depth collar, and then your two set screws. These do not have to be torqued to 5,000 foot-pounds. They have thumb screws on them because that's all you need to tighten them with is your thumb. Probably use a finger too. It'd be hard to just do it with your thumb. Anyway, so get our bolts started here, and then we're going to torque them to 30. Now when you're torquing your bolts, make sure your cutting head is not contacting the block so it can rotate freely. When you're torquing them, always rotate the handle because there's not a lot of clearance between the cutting head and this spot here where the filler band runs on the liner. So if you torque them without rotating your head, it can bind up because you're not centered. This is not a self-centering counterbore cutter. So by rotating the handle, it should self-center itself. Remember, 30 foot-pounds, not a lot. You don't want to over-torque these. You could distort the base, and then you're going to have a bad day. So those are torqued, ready to go. Shims, the point of this is to get a shim in here. Well, in there. Now this one, we're going to be using, it's set at a 32, well, the box that came in said it was 32 thousandths. What I'm getting is about 33 thousandths. Doesn't necessarily matter if you're going to use the shim to set your cut depth. Now what do I mean by that? So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen this. Now this sets your cut depth, this sets your cut. That might not make any sense, but here's what we're going to do. You're going to find a good clean spot. This is your cutting bit. You can see it. You don't want to pick a spot on the block that's cavitated or pitted because that'll be deeper. You want to pick the highest spot on the block to start with. So that looks clean. I don't see any wear in this particular spot. Generally, between the liners is a bad place to pick because usually that's where you get sunk liners. We're resting on the cutting bit. How do you know? Because this is easy to turn. If it gets firm, that means you're picking up the cutting head because obviously it weighs quite a bit. So as you can see, this is rotating free. All the weight's on the cutting bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go till it's about very lightly firm. So it's starting to pick up on the cutting bit. That's where I like to start. This is what I like to call the zero spot. As you can hear, it's shaving some spots and not shaving other spots. So it's squaring the bore for our first cut. Yeah, it barely removed hardly anything in certain spots. It did remove some in other spots, which tells you there was some wear in there. So that's our 0 point. This collar is going to set your cut depth because this is going to move up. When it hits this, it's going to stop. So that's where your shim comes into play. Now you're going to want a shop vac or something because it's going to put these metal shavings almost everywhere. So at this point, lower one's tight. Okay, so this we can still pull it out. Now check, because sometimes one spot will be slightly, like this side on the back is tighter than the front. The shims generally are very evenly cut. So pick your widest spot, so where the shim goes in the easiest, and then retighten to that point. Because what you don't want to do is cut to your tightest point. That might give you a deeper cut. Just keep rechecking. Because you'd rather be done and be a little bit shallow on your cut. You can always cut a little more. It's very hard to cut a little less after you've already cut, as they say. Measure twice, cut once. We're going to measure about 4 times and cut once on this guy. 2x4s are a lot cheaper than engine blocks. Okay, so I'd say that's pretty good. It doesn't matter, like I said, if you're a little on the tight side. Now we took a little bit off there with our first squaring cut. Generally I like a little less to come off, but you don't control how square that cut was in the first place, so it'll tend to tighten up when you tighten it, so you got to be careful. Okay, we should be good there. Okay, so we did our first cleaning cut. We're now going to cut all the way down. How much is all the way down? Well, that one measured about 33 thousandths. Each of these lines is about 1 thousandths down. Now you're not moving the top one. Do not touch the top one again. So what you're going to do is you're going to back this guy off 1 line. So that's 1 thousandths additional. What you're doing is you're slowly lowering this cutting head by moving this collar slightly up. Not much came off there. There we go. Now, can you go more than 1 thousandths per cut? Yes, you can. I've gone up 1.5, 2 thousandths at a time. I've found, although it is more tedious, by going 1 thousandths at a time, you get a much better cut and less risk of chattering. What's chattering? Well, if you go by too much, the blade can actually jump during the cut, and it'll leave little teeth marks in your cut, and it's hard to get out. Then you have to start cutting it by 1/2 thousandths to remove it. Now, do we know by how much we've cut at this point? Well, by the lines, probably about 5 thousandths, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to need your dial indicator on your sled gauge over there to tell you. And once you've cut most of the way, you're going to want to start checking it, because like I said, you don't want to go over. About every 8 to 10, I'll usually vacuum it up. Because as you can see, quite a bit of metal shavings. Office use only, huh? I like to really clean the cutting bit also, if you can. Get under there. Now at any point, you can check your cut depth, and it never hurts to tell. So you can get your dial indicator here. That's going to be hard. You got to get it against the body of the cutting head. Zero it. And I'm betting we're around 8 thousandths here. Could be slightly off. Hey, stop moving. About 8 or 9 thousandths. Definitely gonna want to time lapse this one. Yeah, so there is a bolt here, folks. Not really for driving the machine. You really want to use it by hand. I have in the past tried to use a ratchet on here. I've tried to use a drill. Not very successful. It's best to do it by hand. A drill, not really going to give you the torque you need to slowly turn it, but also if it gets bound up or anything, you could start getting chattering and you can't feel as much as turning it by hand. This is a hand cutting tool. There are powered ones that are a lot fancier that will cut this same bit here, but as a hand cutting tool, generally don't use power tools on it. It's free country though, but I wouldn't recommend it. Now, if you have shims that all measure exactly the same size and you mic them all, do you need to reset up the machine each time? Not necessarily. I've done sets of 6 where after setting it up on the first cut, I don't change our stop setting here, and I've gotten consistent results with that. If your shims, you're getting thickness discrepancies, you'll want to reset it each time. And obviously, as you get towards the end of your cut, always check it, because the last thing you want to be doing is cutting deeper than the thickness of your shim. You might say, well, what if I lost count? I always lose count because I don't count how many lines we have here. You can tell between the gap here how much is left. I can tell we've got at least 10 thousandths more to go. If you wanted to, you could get a feeler gauge even and see and measure along the way. When you can see almost no light, you know you're almost done. If you're doing a full set of 6 also, I've found that not doing the adjacent ones is easiest because you get a lot of metal shavings in your adjacent ones. So I've found if you're gonna do all 6, start on one end and then jump. So you go 6, 4, 2, and then you can start back here at 5, 3, 1. That way you have enough room to get the machine away from all these metal shavings when you reset it up. If you go from one to the other, you're gonna have to pick up the machine, set it, clean everything, then reset it back down. I use a brake chamber diaphragm, the 30, I think it's a 30-30 diaphragm for the brake canisters on a truck. Depending on the brand, which ones you get, you can set them in here just below where you're cutting, and it'll give the cutting head enough room to not contact it, because if you had something here, the cutting head would actually hit it. So it will catch basically everything that's not getting caught here. Some will obviously get in your head bolt holes and your water ferrule holes, but it'll stop it from dropping on the crank. This one doesn't have a crankshaft, so we don't have to worry about that also. You're also gonna wanna tape up your rod bearing journals, because if these metal shavings get in your crank oil feed holes on your rods, they're gonna go right into the new bearings, which is not ideal. Now, what if you have the machine, but you don't have the shim you're gonna be using it? Could you still cut it? Well, yes, you could. You just wouldn't necessarily know exactly what the shim you're gonna be getting will measure at. But if you're ordering, let's say 32,000 shims, you could use a feeler gauge or cut and measure to 32 thousandths. So we're getting pretty close. We can see almost no light through our cutting our stops here. So what are we at? So we're at 31 thousandths right now. Here's the thing. You're cutting to use a shim to move your liner height up. Some guys like to run more liner height on your liner protrusion. Some guys want it at 6 thousandths. Some guys want it at 4 thousandths. I've heard of guys that want 7 or 8. Cat specification is with liner shims 3.5 to 6 thousandths. If you go over 6, you risk cracking a liner flange. But some guys like more crush on the head gasket. So if you were to stop here and then use that shim, which measures around 33, you'd be adding 2 thousandths to your liner height at your final liner projection readings. So I wouldn't want it at 31 with that shim, because I want them to be around 4 to 5 thousandths. So we're gonna go a little more, which we haven't hit the stop yet, so everything so far is going good. We should hit the stop in about 1 or 2 thousandths more. If we go 2 thousandths more and it hasn't stopped, I'm just gonna stop. Because that measured at about 33. And I don't want to go to 34, 35 thousandths. but I bet we find that we're pretty dang close. Oop. So as you can see, it moved there. So we're at our stop now. So this should be our final cut. And yeah, we're not cutting much at this point. So let's vacuum and I'll do our measurements here. Try to get it as zeroed as possible. So that's showing about 32 there. Maybe 32 and a half. Let's go to the other side. Obviously, with the machine on, you can't measure in every spot, but sometimes you'll get one side will be slightly deeper than the other. So about 33 there, which is about perfect, right? That's what our shim measured at. So since we've got a 33 here and a 32 and a half on the other one, let's pull the machine off and get a really good reading. Now, like I said, I'll usually leave the top collar alone since that was a pretty good reading. And I like to run the lower one back so that when you move the machine, the cutting bit is not resting on the deck. Take our head bolts on. Well, our counterbore cutting bolts. Now be careful, there might be metal shavings on the bolt threads and you do not want to carry those into your next bore. Yep, see. So make sure you clean the debris off before it goes into the next bore. Boop. So we should be at about 0. It's always hard when someone doesn't prep the block right to get a good flat surface, but we should be around 30. Yep. 32 and a half, 33. We know those two are 32 and a half, 33. You can measure it at as many places as you want, but you should be getting a good square cut. Yep. 30, about 32 and a half. Oh, I'm getting off the ledge there. 32 and a half, right there. So that is a properly cut counterbore. And let's see if the shim fits. That's the next thing, or the last thing I should say. So hopefully this fits right in there. And yep. Now if it's a CAT shim, this is an aftermarket one, but CAT shim will have a part number that goes towards the top and the underside's beveled. This one is not. Doesn't matter, but make sure it actually fits in the bore. If it doesn't, you're good to go. It does not have to be super tight, nor do you want it super loose, so I'd say that's about a perfect fit. That one's ready for the liners to be reinstalled.